Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to yet another session of DNI Pe Charcha April edition brought to you by India Diversity Forum. I, Ketki Bhagwat, welcome you to this DNI Pe Charcha. To discuss on an interesting topic, India Diversity Forum brings you to an exclusive panel discussion on the topic what challenges put gender equality out of reach for most companies. And to begin this wonderful session, I would like to welcome our esteemed speakers for the session. I'd like to introduce Mr. Kanhaiya Lal Sharma, Head HR, Curve Digital. We also have Mr. Praveen Gupta, Vice President HR India from ACOM India Private Limited. Let's welcome Padma Gupta, Director HR Customer Experience, Happily India. And our moderator for the session, Ms. Namita Patwari, Head Talent and Organization Development at Blue Dart Express Limited. Thank you all the speakers for accepting the invitation and being a part of this wonderful panel discussion. Namita, all over to you.
Thank you, first of all, Ketki, for organizing such a wonderful panel discussion. And thanks to IDF for continuously putting in efforts for this topic, which has become so very crucial nowadays. We so much inclusion in our day-to-day life in the corporate. So I'm going to take this ahead and go ahead with the questions. First to Mr. Praveen, that what specific policies and initiatives have you seen that has worked well in promoting diversity and inclusivity in your wealth of experience in your organization? If you can throw some light on that.
Yeah, sure, Namita. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, and a great welcome to all the participants and the panel members as well. As you rightly said, Namita, this is something which has been an issue which has been on the top of the agenda for most of the organization for I think more than many decades now, and organizations have been grappling with that whole issue of how do we create diverse organizations, and for purposes which we are all aware as to why do we need to create the diverse organizations and so on and so forth. I have been with ACOM for the last about 13 years now, and I've really seen a great amount of relentless effort from the global leadership on ensuring that we build a diverse organization across the globe. And we are happy that though we're not reached a stage where we can say, are we diverse 50%, but we are about 35% women globally. And we are not an IT company, we are a design consulting infrastructure supervisory company where the talent is not as welcoming as an IT industry could be in terms of the options of career choices which people make there. Having said that, I think before I get into the policies and practices, the most important thing to my mind is the accountability and ownership, and whose baby is this at the end of the day, and I think I can say for sure with ACOM, this has really been driven right from the board level. So much so that, on a monthly basis, there are matrices which are shared with the board, which goes beyond just the gender diversity. We're looking at underrepresented group all across the world. We're trying to identify what are those groups mean, because what means for US may not be meaning for India as well. So all that work is happening, and the board is being aware of that as well. And the fundamental idea being that we need to build a diverse organization, and then given the benefits that. In terms of specifics, so not only the top leadership owns the accountability of the diversity, I think that goes down in the organization as well. Majority of our senior leaders have very clear targets, I would say, and which they need to work on, and they really do ensure that they have they're building and they're participating in building a diverse organization as well. In terms of very specific policies, I think the couple of things which I like to call out really, especially with regards to ACOM, because we're really focusing on both externally and internally as well. And internally, what we are looking at, because I think over a period of many years, and the organization which has seen, and especially in the Asian context, it may not be as relevant in the non-Asian context, but in the Asian context, at a certain level and beyond, there is a limited supply or availability of women talent, if I were to use DNI from women point of view as well here. And this fact got recognized, I think, by ACOM much ahead in advance. So how are we then promoting that? So we actually launched a very specific program. We call it Empower as a program. which is a 1-year program, which is run across the organization, and we invite participate exclusively for female colleagues in the organization. And this program kind of helps them to challenge some of the paradigms they have in their mind in terms of what can scuttle their growth and how can they grow in the organization. And we being a diverse organization, which is spread all over the world, the opportunities are enough. There are many opportunities, but yes, sometimes we put some limitations to our growth as well. So this is a program where they engage with successful leaders. They sort of get to write their stories. They understand what enabled their career growth in the organization, what are the challenges they had to face, and so on. So besides giving very specific inputs in terms of when they're at a particular level in the career, what can further their career interest and so on and so forth. That's one, which is again, which is a well, I would say, ingrained program in the organization, running very, very successfully. India participated last year, and we sort of really seeing the advantages. We're seeing that the other participants have opened up and having conversation with the managers as to how can they grow their career more and at the high levels in the organization. That's one initiative. Second, which I think very close to my heart, we ran a global pay parity situation across the organization as to how are we positioned internally as an organization. Are there any discrimination which have crept in? Knowingly, unknowingly, we don't know. But sometimes when you look at data points, you understand there are those data points which are staring at you. And then corrective measures were done. If there were any clear discriminations or pay disparities amongst the gender groups, we really drove it very, very hard here. And there could be other initiatives as well. But these are one which I really thought to talk about, and which I think have been very successful in positioning AECOM the way it is right now globally. Yeah.
So great, Praveen, that this has been very useful. In fact, my next question is very similar to the first question, which you already have partially covered, but then I would still like to ask, because the audience, I'm sure, would be very much interested in that, one of the very significant challenges today we are facing to have more female representation at the leadership level, at the board level. So what are the kind of initiatives that you suggest, or have you experienced it or practices that has given you the best of the results?
See, again, I will go back to the AECOM context here. If I were to look at globally, we have a very strong representation by women at the global level as well. And when I say globally, is the whole of US, the whole of Europe, that's fantastic. But when you come into Asia, that's where the numbers looks very, very different when we're looking at it. And there could be n number of reasons. I don't want to get into n number of reasons. I'll come back specifically on India. Yes, we've had challenges. We've had challenges on many counts. There were challenges, one, availability of the senior talent in the market. That was a very clear challenge, what we have seen. And there have been concerted efforts, and like so many years, we've been trying to build a very strong leadership and kind of driving that point across the organization. But we've not been very successful there. But then we flipped the tide. We said, okay, let's look at it. If we're not getting externally, talent to come in the organization, why don't we start looking at developing talent internally as well? So there is very clear focus on a tier 2 and tier 3 leadership in the organization. And as I talked about the Empower program, that's just one of the initiatives which is there. There are initiatives like there are employee resource group. There are women returning program we are running. I won't say successfully, but we're creating a buzz in the market. We're really creating it. We are providing you the enabling structure, the environment for you to come back and join the workforce. And there are many reasons why women do take a break. So yes, but to my mind, this whole piece about building the organization, it cannot be very short term. It has to be a little long-term goal. You got to look at 3 to 5 year perspective. And which is where we're really saying that let's focus, let's start investing into a second tier and third tier. And over a period of 3 to 5 years, we'll see the emerging leaders coming in from these segments as well. The leadership is pretty much committed there, and then a lot of efforts and investment is going on in that direction.
That's really great. And Praveen, I'm so glad to know that now the companies are investing in the women from the ground level to middle level to ensure that we create future leadership for the board representation or leadership for women, because only we can start it now or never. So I think that's a phenomenal initiative that you and your organization is driving it. Just to add that even we at Blue Dart and DHL, we have the same program called Empowered.
Okay.
In a very similar fashion, we are running, and it is happening all in 200 countries across the globe. So we are also quite into it, and it also gives me there are other corporates who are also joining the same I would say path that will help us to create better India, a better place for women to be at the leadership level. So thank you for that insight.
Just to add one more piece into it, as I said, we are a consulting organization, and we are essentially consulting in the infrastructure space. And this is a space which is traditionally been not at the level where it is right now in terms of the kind of programs, the kind of government initiatives which is coming to build infrastructure. I mean, India has a huge gap and appetite for building world-class infrastructure, which is where we have a role to play. But when I look at externally, this is not the career which majority of the women would have picked up, the civil engineering, structural engineering, those kind of stuff. But what we really see in some areas, let's say if I look at urban planning, master planning, architecture, environment, these are areas where we have close to 50-50 representation of women in these segments across the levels in the organization. Yeah. But the moment I go to the hardcore engineering, and within the hardcore engineering, when I go to the project management work, which is the field work, which is where we see a little bit of a challenge there by attracting female to kind of join that. But in the design side, I think the story is very different here, which is encouraging, because at some point in time, what you want to design, you also want to see that executed on the ground level as well, and which is aspirationally is a great thing to see by any professional. And we really see that level of a career trajectory taking place over a period of time, when women also want to go on the field and really be able to, brick and mortar kind of a situation where you're working in a little tough environments and really creating something which you design yourself. Yeah.
I completely resonate, and I would say music to my ears, because it has been always a traditional roles that women have been playing, and venturing into some this kind of roles which are not traditionally played by women, accepted by the board, accepted by the stakeholders, and women are coming forward to take up these kind of roles are so essential now, because once we have more gender balance, obviously it does help overall decision making, overall success of the organization. So thank you for sharing that. Great. I will move to Kanaya Lal. I have a very interesting question for you. How can companies effectively address the unconscious bias in the workplace and create a more inclusive environment?
Thanks. First of all, thanks to IDF and thanks, Namita, for this interesting question, and IDF for this opportunity to be on the stage sharing the stage with all of you. So I'd answer a question about how do we address unconscious bias. So first of all, how I look at things is not from an HR perspective. I'm probably the most or say least HR person on this whole board who thinks like a non-HR always. But my point is here, does it make sense for the particular organization, for the particular industry, and in society in general to promote diversity and equality? Does it make sense? If we all agree that if it makes sense, then we should find out ways to implement that. And one area where we look at is unconscious bias. Now, is it there? I think it's pretty much there in every aspect of life, not only in our corporate world. Just I will take a step back and relate to what Praveen said about a lot of women being in core fields or the fields which are traditionally not being for women. I'm married to someone like that. My wife is an electrical engineer, goes out to the field on a job where she probably rain or shine, she has to do whatever she does, which I don't know about. She can't fix the fan though, but yeah, she does there whatever she does on the work. But the thing is, I have seen the kind of biases she has to deal with in a team of about overall 70 members. She's the only woman. Now, is it easy? Is it easy on evening shifts? Is it easy on night shift? Is it easy on field where there's no network connectivity and she's out there? Maybe, may not be. I don't know, right? She's the right person to answer that. But those are some of the things that we are trying to address as a whole society. And because I work in a tech setup or an IT setup, I can definitely say that what we have seen here is just a little bit different. the best way for me that works is how do we address unconscious bias is to train the people towards it, make them first of all acknowledge that yes, there is a bias that exists, and how we can train people about first of all being aware of it, and then how they can monitor and track it, and then with consistent feedback, with consistent training, with consistent coaching and guidance, how we can address that particular bias. Also, sometimes, right, again, this is counterintuitive to an HR, but we should basically select a certain bunch of people and get certain initiatives done just because we want to have a starting point, right? Sometimes a blind select is where it's not always, but sometimes where it is appropriate, we should do that. I'll give an example here. So in our organization, when we go out to campuses or where we hire anybody, we make a very bold statement that we don't care about what percentage you have scored, what field of engineering you are coming from and all. If you want to code and you can code, we have a role for you. You can sit in the interview process, because that is all what they need to do when they are here, at least at a starting point in their career, right? So that also carries forward to our further interview rounds and all. So coding round is a big chunk of the decision-making process when we hire someone. And what we do is when the coding rounds assessment happens for any candidate, we don't share any other details other than the solution what a candidate has provided. So if I'm an interviewer or I'm trying to assess somebody's code, I don't know whether it is Kanhaiya's code or Namita's code. For me, it's just a code that will come. I will review the code. If the code is good, I'll pass the candidate to the next round. I would not know while reviewing the code whether it's a male, female, XYZ, any other gender. Now, where it helps is if there is a bias at all in the form of, okay, can this person be able to work shifts? Though we don't have such roles, but again, assuming that there are, because we work with a global setup, we have a lot of our counterparts in UK, all those questions get nullified at all. You select somebody straight at the beginning on the basis of what's the most important aspect of the job that they will do. On the other side, we try to ensure that all our communication, what we send, whether it is on job descriptions, whether it is on promotion letters, whether it is on any other documents, they all are gender neutral. The interview process to exit process, everything is based on merit, based on the capability to do the job, not on what gender somebody carries. One other thing we consciously have been doing, and I think most of the industry does, Praveen also mentioned about it, is looking at gender pay gap analysis. You said you have also done it in your organization. So that is something that we consciously do. And every 6 months or every 3 months, not because it is only for to check the gender pay gap, but in general, we have to do it for market mapping, right? We are in technology industry, and everybody knows how volatile technology industries pay parity is, right? Every 3 months, what used to be valid 3 months back is now completely obsolete, and it keeps changing. So when we are doing it, when we are checking our people against a higher market benchmark, why not every strata of our people as well? That includes women, that includes everybody else. So rather than creating a certain program for diversity, what we try to do is, can we equalize things? Can we talk about equality? Can we remove that bias totally from anywhere, while even talking about, or maybe even sometimes we don't talk about diversity for the very same reason. And that has yielded good results. I think as a company, Curve Digital is having a good woman representation overall, as well as not at the level where we want in terms of the C-suite representation, but I think a lot more women are on track to be there, I'm sure, in next couple of years and all, because they are crossed the mid-management level and more on the directorship level there are coming. So yeah, things are looking positive in that segment for us.
So Kanhaiya, this is so true what you said, that the unconscious bias, whether we want it or we don't want it, but it still keeps coming back and it still exists everywhere, whether we are hiring, we are promoting, we are giving any transfers, and so on. So given that situation, when we do especially the hiring process, I think what you shared is so important and vital for each one of us, that we mask it or we don't share the gender but we share the role, which is more important, and the capability of a person or a human being to perform that role, and that is going to yield the benefits to the real performing asset, instead of thinking that, okay, we need to create diversity, or we need to give a specific role to women or a transgender to anyone. So I think this is a very good practice that you're doing it, and I'm sure some of our people from the audience also would might want to practice that. Given that this is going to be very beneficial. Also, very important part that I would like to share, that there are organizations, they also come up with certain percentage of fresh hires have to be women, and when they go to the campus nowadays, they are only taking women candidates, whether the role is traditional, not traditional, or whatever it is. And I've seen a lot of management trainees or graduate trainees, they are so enthusiastically applying for this kind of role. So even the Gen Z is changing the mindset, which is also quite a good thing.
Absolutely.
So another question for you, Kanayalal. There are often cultural barriers that we just spoke about in achieving the gender equality. So these can also include attitude, belief system, which is perpetuating to the gender stereotyping. So what is it that you would like to do, or you are doing to come over this?
So, see, I'd say possibly barriers exist, and sorry, maybe definitely it exists. Now, as an organization, I would like to believe that we don't have that. Again, I'm representing my organization, so I'll only say good things. But I think it's very important to, again, going back to my first point there, right? We need to coach people. We need to educate them and train them to overcome these cultural barriers. It can be in the form of training programs. It can be in the form of mandatory. So I'm sure every organization, everybody sitting out here has a mandatory POS training that we all ensure that all our employees go through multiple times through the year, and any new joiner. But what's beyond that, right? How do we treat people who are not from the similar background with respect, and at the same time, we don't want people not to be not to create a bond and not to create a culture of belonging, because then people would start losing out, right? Because somebody is so afraid to talk to another gender, and whether they will say right or wrong things, it should not happen that the other person loses out on a meaningful opportunity or meaningful chance to bond with their teammates. That is also important, especially for a company which is growing like us, which was a small time company about 3-4 years back, and now you're a mid-sized organization. So it's very important to keep that family DNA intact, at the same time manage the growth. So and then instead of repeated training, there would be employees who will resist in their overcoming their beliefs. It's I'll probably say a very non-HR thing, but it's important to take a strong action at those points. Sometimes we need to make example out of it, and probably ask those employees to either mend their ways or find a different place, because the organization's culture is very important. And when we talk about equality and equal opportunity employer, we need to take those seriously for the greater well-being of all the employees and all the people that are there in the organization.
So yeah, Kanayalal, I think very well said. If we want to create that equal opportunity organization, I think it is each one of our responsibility to do that. So great. Thank you for sharing such insights. I will move on to Padma, our third panel member. Padma, there is an interesting question for you. Have you ever experienced or witnessed gender discrimination in your work environment or any other environment where you were operating on?
Okay. Hello, good afternoon, all. Interesting question. I think as a woman, and after having worked for almost more than 2 decades, I think these conversations have become much better. And I think while I would quote an experience from a long time back, I think things have really changed. And I would like to believe that, those things wouldn't exist at this point in time in many organizations. I think one of the most difficult things and where you would experience discrimination of sorts would be, during appraisals and for movements, especially, the pre-assumption that if you are a woman, your career would probably be secondary to an equally deserving male candidate, because he has a responsibility and a house to run and a family to take care. So it's okay for you to give up, this year and let the guy grow. So I've heard about this. I think in my younger days, I've also heard a lot of comments about dressing. And there used to be this huge bias towards women who would like to present themselves well. I think the more nerdy you looked and the more underdressed you look was sort of like a stamp of seriousness that you meant business. I am so glad for all the MNC banks which managed to change that a couple of years down the line with all their business development teams. So yeah, typically these are the biases that exist. Luckily for me, I agree with Kanaya there that I have never had to face a pay parity issue. I think I have always, and being in HR, we do have access to all the data. So you can very easily check, whether there is a bias. But yes, bias because, bias is very subtle. So let's say there is a travel and there's a really exciting opportunity. Comments like, would you be able to manage alone in a new country? Have you ever traveled alone without your family? Now, these are all such unsaid discriminatory remarks, which are, sort of hidden under fair concern. And I totally get it. But then it also adds on to the subconscious bias, which is already there and takes away the confidence to a large degree. So I think these are the subtle biases which need to be addressed at an organizational level. Perhaps, like Anaya said, or like earlier the gentleman said, that the policy level needs to make sure that you provide a secure environment. Agnostic of the gender, if a woman has to travel, then you need to provide that environment. I mean, if you feel that the woman is pampered, let the man be pampered too. If you have to provide a cab at night, that's where equality comes in. I mean, if the guy has to search for how to get back because he can manage it, and the woman gets a special facility, the man will never be able to come out and be, unbiased towards women because he sees it as an unfair practice. So I think in my experience, it is a systemic level change which we need to bring about.
So yeah, Padma, I think very well said, especially on the discrimination part. I think I completely resonate in what you're saying, being a woman again in the same kind of situation, if not similar. But then, yeah, I think I would also like to give the credit to a lot of MNCs who have come in India and changed the thought process that a woman can really dress up well and come to work, and it should not be considered in any wrong sense. So I think the discrimination had started to change a few years back. And when now I see the Gen Z coming in the office and they're totally different, they are totally into themselves and in their workspace, being agile and resilient and not really worried about whether I'm a guy or a girl, but I'm here to work. And I think that's the culture that is prevailing nowadays. So thank you for giving that insights. And my next question again is for Padma. Um, Now we're talking about stereotyping, we're talking about systemic issues. So my question is around that. Do you feel that more than factors such as differences in the job roles, education, experience, that is causing the gender equality is often rooted to the systemic biases and that undervalued the women contribution at the larger level?
Sure. So I have a very different take, and like Kanaya said, I'm very non-HR like. I think my thought process often finds a lot of resistance when I say it, but I'll say it. When we are saying that a bias exists, we also have to take a step back and see that the workplace is not responsible for the bias. In fact, the workplace is contributing so heavily to remove the bias. The root cause is somewhere else, at a larger social construct level. So, it doesn't help to talk about diversity at the workplace and talk about inclusion at the workplace. But then at the end of the day, when you go back home and when you're deciding, or you're a part of a family with a spouse, or or your sister or your daughter, then you let all the biases creep in. So while in your workplace you may not directly be a contributor to the bias, in a larger way to the society you are creating a bias. So I might be very supportive and say that, if I'm a male, and say that I totally agree that women should be given great maternity leaves and be allowed to work from home, and once they come back from maternity they should be treated as equal. But then when I am back at home, I want my wife to stay back and take care of the kids, because I feel that the children need care and attention. Now, that is where the root cause comes, because now you are again replanting the seed, which probably your wife or your sister's or your daughter's organization is working so hard to break the bias. And like, I'm sorry, I didn't get the name. The name says PG. The gentleman said so well about the program which welcomes women back to the career. Now, on one side, as corporates, we are all trying to welcome back women. At the same time, there is so much glorification of the so called womanly role. It is difficult then to have the organization fight that battle with the larger society, right? So the systemic biases creeps in from the society into the workplace rather than vice versa. I mean, all of us on the panel here, the four of us who are representative of different industries, all of us are trying to create, a gender neutral environment, or, a diversity and inclusion environment. But then we also need the backing of our families, our society, our social construct to actually remove the bias. So that for me is one of the biggest root cause which does not allow the bias to go out completely. So that's my a take on why it's so difficult to eliminate it.
No, I think Padma, this piece is the corporate is a part of the larger society at a macro level, and the corporate is inbuilt part of this macro society that we are talking about. And for years together, we have seen that whether it is women or transgender or any other gender have had this inequality. When it comes to home chores, it is always imagined and believed that it is going to be women who's going to take care. When a child is crying in a very small age, it is always seen that a mother has to really take care of a child. And when it is a very challenging role, if it is a P&L role, if it is a role which has a lot of travel, it is always seen that a man can do justice to that role, not a woman. So these things have been coming into our lives for years together. And it is not just, as you rightly said, that the corporate which is creating this, it is the society at large which is creating, believing, and passing on to the next generation of the entire conscious, unconscious, subconscious biases, and just creating one more situation where, okay, this can happen, but are we really believing that this should happen? That's another topic that we really need to look at it from the perspective of gender, because if the child is crying, even a father can take care of a child. And if there is a P&L role, women can also do justice to that P&L role. So this kind of a different thought process, this kind of a wavelength where we need to match with leadership, with HR, with stakeholders has become extensively important. And I completely second you in this, being into HR and also working in a very different industry where the men to women ratio is extremely poor in logistic firm, and it is so damn difficult for us to attract women talent. However, we would want to have more and more women challenging men that yes, we can also be a shoulder to shoulder and deliver, if not better, but definitely at the same pace and the level. So, given the fact that we all are coming from a very different industry, as Padma has rightly said, that yes, we are facing the similar challenges and similar thought process, and I think it's coming from more from the societal pressure, societal background, thought process for years together. It has been built up within India and Asia. Praveen also mentioned that because globally, when I look at it from the other countries' perspective, it is much better when it comes to India. I think after a certain age, women themselves are also not wanting to get into the prominent career because the mother in them are wanting to stay back home again because for years together they have seen their mothers doing that, so they want to also continue doing that. Kanaya also made a very important point that when there is a role and if we give the gender, then people start mismatching it. If there is a very clear thought process that it is not the gender, but it is the role, which definitely differs and which is where one should be really focusing on. So I think these are some of the biases. They're already existing in our society, and not that we are creating from the corporate. Rather, corporate is trying to juggle and give some opportunity, create some space for whether it is for women or for transgender or for even some of the roles which are been traditionally managed by women but now can be also managed by men. So I think it is the corporate which is giving more support to the society to become gender agnostic and unbiased. I think panel, I would go to everybody, whoever would like to add on to it.
I think I'll take a first shot if others don't mind. So I picked up a very nice point what Namita you mentioned, right, about whether it is giving comfort to a crying child or about doing a PNL. So I have a toddler, so I have a PNL role as well. So I look at this, the toddler when she's crying, it's not whether I go and comfort her or whether my spouse goes and comfort her, right? She just needs comfort at that point. If she hit her head somewhere, she needs a comfort. Whoever is there, we do it. It's part of the job of raising a kid. Same goes to PNL. Money doesn't care about gender, right? Money is money. There's a responsibility that is being given by the organization to the individual to take care of that in a certain way to the best to our ability. Money in our pockets also doesn't look at gender, right? It just says salaries credited. It doesn't say his salary is credited or her salary is credited. So that's up to us on how do we want to treat gender bias as organizations. Again, I'm sure no company wants to not leverage equality, because the more diversity, the more equal workforce is, and more people come through the ranks through that. It's better for the organization because a variety of thoughts process comes up, a variety of people come in, you create new policies as you talk to new people. Classic case, I feel, I think I read somewhere that I think there's an old report of McKinsey that around 2020, the C-suite representation for women was about 20-21% across various sectors and industries. It can be wrong, a little bit old data, but I'm sure now if you look at after almost 3 years of COVID, that should have changed, at least if not in the sector that I am in. We see that fundamentally a lot of more opportunities had come up because of the whole shift towards hybrid or remote work or whatever you want to call it. It's not that it was not there. As an organization, even in our case, we always had remote work as a facility. We never had to, in fact, formalize a plan or a policy saying that Kanaya is working remote or Namita is going to office and, or vice versa. But it was an benefit, probably less people used to take it. Now we have seen more when we have hired in last 2.5 years and all, people being more vocal about it. So in fact, at 2021 late, we realized that we actually never formalized something around that policy, because we always thought it's a basic thing to have. Anybody can take it as long as they are able to do their job from wherever they are. So as a company, when I was doing an interview, or when I used to do interviews, I always used to say that whether you are in Bangalore or Bhatinda or Himalayas, I don't care. As long as you can do your job, you can feel free to sit in the interview process. So that's there. Also, that does come with its own challenges. How do we manage a vast workforce? How do we look at creating, again, going back to the DNA of the organization, how we ensure that it doesn't get diluted? All those are good problems to have. Identify, those silent people across larger groups who may be doing their job to the best of their ability and are fantastic, but how do we, identify their contribution? And sometimes we have seen more often than not, women are also part of that. Those, the unintentional biases that are there, that forms that, okay, she doesn't speak up that much, but then she's the person who does the best job. If you look at objectively the performance review, right? Just look at the quality of code, look at deliverables or whatever. So those all opportunities are there. Women on break who have probably not relocated to cities like Bangalore or other Mumbai or other cities, because they were in certain areas and opportunities were not there to them. Today, probably with hybrid and remote, more and more options are opening up for them. But are we there yet? I don't think so. But I think we are a lot better, and probably, okay, I don't like to give pandemic a good credit for it, but somewhere because of the whole COVID and the things that it set in motion, I think we are coming better off of that. And we are also having more interesting problems to solve on this side.
I think that's so very true, and I resonate completely, because being into hiring side of it, post pandemic, I think there are more people who are keen on more, I would say, different roles. They are really not worried about that, whether I have to come to the office or I'm not supposed to come to the office. Is as good as the role is interesting, just challenging. It satisfies my career need, then yes, I'm going to apply for it. I think that change in mindset has really helped us as a corporate to really hire quality and not just go for a particular gender and think it, okay, fine, this work will be done only by a particular gender. So I think that has been a very big plus, I would say, in last couple of years, 2-3 years especially. Yeah. So thanks, Kanaya, for bringing that up. Your view, Praveen, Padma?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think I completely agree with Padma's comment when she talked about the social construct and the organizational construct as well here. And the point is true. I mean, the kind of discussions which have happened in the organizations over many, many decades, especially in India, I think the narrative has changed to a great extent. Yeah, where people are very comfortable talking about issues, and not only comfortable, are able to see from the lens of how can we support and drive. Maybe because they're really seeing the benefits which are emanating from building a diverse organization, which is very, very clear. But I still think, it sometimes could be a sector specific situation as well, because not many sectors would see that level of involvement, engagement, and appreciation of building that diverse organization. As you talked about your organization, Namita, that there are challenges about, and it could be challenges at the level of finding talent, and also at the level of an inbuilt inherent bias in the organization as well, the way they see these things. And this, so if I were to look at for myself, because I've worked in traditional industries as well, I working in consulting, I see a huge shift in the Indian context taking place for the last about 15-20 years now, where a much more openness and inclusivity and the need to provide that platform is coming into play as well. The only other point I want to make here, because we've been having this discussion internally in the organization, and we being part of a global organization, and obviously India is not stacked up there in terms of the top numbers, but we started to talk about it. Look, the need to create an diverse organization is the first and paramount need. Why are we only looking at from a lens of gender diversity? India is otherwise a huge diverse country, yeah, whether it is a language or religion or regions or blah, blah, we come back. So we may not have problems of black and white or other representations, but we do have this fantastic mosaic of people which comes from all over the country. And fundamentally, when we look at it, and this is something which has been, I think, well accepted within my organization as a strong narrative, that we never felt that bias. So if I'm talking to somebody, let me take an example from South India or West India or East India, we didn't have that bias. I mean, we never created any lenses in our head and say, hey, I'm talking to this guy, so I need to wear that. Whether it was a school stage or at the sports or the organization, we never operated like that. So I think there is an inherent built-in diversity in our thought process as individuals. Gender gets pronounced because it is visible, and which is where organizations tend to talk about a little more about gender. But I really think that the narrative has changed over a period of time. And as I said, I'm pushing a narrative of building a diverse organization to the true sense of a diverse organization, not limited to a gender, diverse organization.
So yeah, Praveen, I think organization itself has to be not thinking as this gender or that gender. I think very well put across. It's a diverse organization is the terminology that we all need to really vouch for, and I think put it in the culture, because ultimately culture is something that goes a long way for any organization. So great thoughts, and I think it's a great implementation that you and your organization is doing it. Any view, Padma?
So just to add to the fact which Praveen said, about building a very diverse organization, I think one of the things that really
Thoughts
sorry, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can
Padma,
hear you.
you're audible.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
So one of the things that I feel just as a thought process, and that's something which I have been doing in my organization, is that so while we are in the building material industry space, and it is difficult to attract talent really, so it's more of a demand supply equation which we strictly monitor. However, one of the pitfalls that I've seen is many times when we talk about diversity and maintaining the diversity, it gets reduced to a number. So how much percentage of the population is women, and there are so many organizations that I know of where there will be a lot of women probably at very junior levels or in very non-impactful roles, which sort of is like a tick in the box when you're talking about fulfilling at least the gender diversity. Perhaps an interesting way to look at it could also be to look at it with different cuts and filters. So, maybe if you have a 20% diversity of women and maybe 5% of other genders or other diverse candidates, and the rest is the male gender, is your cost distribution in the same way? Is the same diversity existing at all levels, or is it on an overall picture, while you say that okay, I have 20% or 30% women, but they are all largely at the end where they are not able to really be strategically driving the organization? So to my mind, that is something which typically I like to keep track of, because it helps me from the pitfalls of statistics, which are often very easy to fall into. So I think that could also be something which would also be very data centric and something which can be impactful along with the cultural aspect that we spoke about.
So yeah, ultimately we all have the cost pressures. We have EBITDA pressures, and we have ultimately the bottom line, which has to be in green and not in red. I think we all breathe through all of these in all the corporates. But given that it's a very fresh and very different thought, Padma, that you're bringing in on the table, that it's a different aspect all to look at it, like how Praveen said that the diverse organization, how Kanaya Lal said that about the various aspect of different roles to be looked at from a different gender perspective. The same way you're bringing in a very fresh thought of the cost side of it, the statistic side of it, the benefit side of it. So given the fact that we all have to really be mindful of the entire statistics in this arena. So, how do you look at it from the futuristic gender balance point of view, the whole statistics part of it?
Is it addressed to me?
Yeah, Padma, yes.
Yeah. So per se internally, so it is a twofold approach that we are taking. So one is, bias removal trainings, how to remove the bias more from a acceptance perspective. So that's the cultural aspect of it. To back it up, so while, let's say the team is ready to hire people and to also nurture teams of different genders, is your infrastructure ready to support it? So let us say if I want to hire a transgender, are you really going out of the way and creating maybe even something as simple as a washroom? Now when a person joins, what do you think that that person will do? So while so my approach for a gender balance in the future would be to look at it from all the three aspects. So one is the general statistical distribution from a number perspective, as well as the cost and impact perspective. Second would be, of course, the cultural perspective, because like I said, the society is so strong and big that we need to work on the cultural aspect more and more. And the third would be from an infrastructure perspective. So, like I said, you also can't have gender equality by creating a very skewed environment which is anti male gender. So, you can't have, all the promotions going to the women in the team, or, all the hiring to be biased towards transgenders or women. So, can we create an infrastructure which will attract talent of all types where they have a fair playing ground? So, to my mind, in the future, to have that balance, we would have to think of it from multiple aspects rather than just from one aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very important and a vital part that Padma, you've mentioned, infrastructure part, because I think when we think of gender diversity, it is so very imperative that our offices, our facilities, our factories, our workplaces are equipped enough, and not just we are adding a ratio or a percentage of creating a gender balance. Also, giving right value to the talent and not to the gender, which has become extremely vital, given that we all want to create a wise balance between the genders that are there. So, thank you for bringing that topic. Ketki, can we have Q&A? I think we have some 7 minutes left. Ketki, can you hear me?
Hi, Namita. I was just going through it. So for now, yet we have not received any questions from our members.
Okay. So, shall we wait, or we can continue the discussion, because the topic is very interesting, and I see all
We
the
can wait for more 2
panel
minutes.
members are quite keen on. So I have one more question for Praveen, because you said that in the global certain things happening. So are there some best practices that you would want to share that has worked in Asian already not done it? Something that you would like to share with us. Probably the audience will also learn something.
I'm sorry, Namita, I lost your question. There was a lot of disturbance in between.
I'm so sorry for that,
Can
Praveen.
you
I'm
repeat?
checking with you that are there any practice in Asian countries that you've observed for gender equality, something that has been always a challenge in Asian country that you have observed at a global level and that you would like to share with the participants?
No, sure. I think when I look at globally the way things are driven, am I audible? Okay, so when I look at really globally, there are best practices. There are the way things are done in the same organization, but in a very different level altogether as well. Yeah. But I think to me, the first and foremost, a fundamental point is a lot of cultural role comes into play here as well, because across various continents and regions and all that, you see the same issue being viewed in a very different lens at a cultural level. That's one, and which I think, which is a hidden, which is like the real iceberg, and you just see the little bit of it, but underneath it sort of plays its own currents and kind of create challenges in the organization as well. But having said that, if I were to look at from AECOM context, and again, especially from the Asian context here, when I look at examples like China, let me give you my company example. I mean, China, they're at 50%, maybe 52% representation of women across career levels in the organization, and also, across various functions as well. And we're a diverse organization, so we have 10, 12 businesses in each of the regions as well. Yeah. I think it's a lot to do, to my mind, with what is the external talent supply which is there in the organization. A lot to do with that, and there, which is where I think some of these countries really have a heads up against us. And just bringing to what Padma said, I think organizationally, all of these organizations are doing a great service to the society by driving this concept very, very aggressively. So I don't think in the organization there exists a bias of not hiring a female or vice versa. But it's the fact that is it really there for me to be able to, like an Indian context? I mean, when I look at, I need to hire a program manager for a metro project. The fact is I may not find anybody. And that's a statement I'm making here. So then what are the options do I have left with? I need to look at it. But we don't see in places like China, or I don't see, I work in Singapore as well. I don't see in those places because there is enough availability of talent. So you don't think in those directions, I think it's a more narrative which is coming in from an Indian context, that we need to think in those directions, and I hope this meets your requirement. I mean, what I was trying to share, not from best practice, but from a very practical perspective right now.
I think it's a great sharing, Praveen, and thanks for bringing that up, because I think it all starts with our minds, right? And that's where we are probably wanting to change, and we should be changing too.
I mean,
So,
frankly, what Kanaya was saying, talking about, masking information. Because I was at one point in time heading the entire Southeast Asia as well. I never felt the need to do that because there's no discussions around that. There's no discussion, oh, is it a male or a female, or this role, that role, can they not do? Nothing of that sort was happening there. So I guess that's more, I don't know, maybe our need, or need of few more neighbors here, but not otherwise. I didn't see that in the Asian context, larger in the Asian context. Yeah.
yeah, I think we all are marching towards it, and hopefully, the days to come, we will not be using all of such technique, and we will be also in a situation where it's a role and it's not a gender which plays while hiring. So great sharing. And I think I would like to give a big thank you to Praveen, Kanayalal, and Padma for bringing such insightful information about gender diversity inclusion in the corporate, in the society, the way we are marching towards it. And I think we also proudly can say that India has become a quite gender agnostic as an organization kind, or as a country kind, or a corporate kind. So thank you very much for the great sharing. Over to you, Katie.
Yes, Namita, we have received one comment in our YouTube segment. One of our member has commented saying that a bias is so intricately woven in our society that the member's 4-year-old made a comment saying that why are there only female drivers? Like, why are there only Didi drivers for the school buses and not any boy drivers? So I think this is also a good point where, a child is observing that, there are only men drivers available, school buses drivers available. Anything you would like to share on this?
So I think it's a very important aspect. That imagine the way our society is right now, a 4-year-old which is handled by a male, and why there are no women in that. And so we are operating at a very different level. I think would like to share views on that. Padma, would you like to say something?
Namita, your voice is breaking, so I couldn't really make out what exactly you wanted me to share.
Padma, would you like? No, I'm sorry for that. I was trying to say that we are operating at a very different level where a 4-year-old is also making a difference in the role that, okay, there's a drivers, so all men are there, and in our society, we are so glued to it that moment. So we are at a very different level in terms of operating that where the genders are placed in terms of roles. So any view on that?
So I think it is, I mean, a 4-year-old's observation is a mixture of probably what he hears in terms of conversations which are more equal in nature. So like Kanayalal said that, he has a toddler, and for the toddler, his mom and dad are agnostic of the role, and either the dad or the mom is rushing if the toddler is crying, depending on availability, to feed him or clothe him. But then at the same time, the same toddler is also observing stereotypes. So in one way, it is also a good news for us that we will also be as as parents, or as corporate professionals, or as educators or teachers. It will also put pressure on us to create a world which is equal for our children down the line. So I think in some ways, probably this generation is at the brinks where they are able to see both. So they are seeing mixes of the stereotype as well as people breaking the stereotypes, and hopefully choosing breaking the stereotypes will be the calling in the world tomorrow.
That's so true, Padma. Thank you very much for sharing that. With this, I think, Ketki, can we conclude this wonderful
Yes.
discussion today?
Yes. So this was a very insightful discussion from learning about some leading best practices to increasing our knowledge on this particular subject. I'm very confident that our DNI members who had joined the session today will have many takeaways from this charcha. And thank you so much, all the panel members, for accepting the invite and being a part of this panel discussion and making it more interesting. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, audience, as well, for joining the session and watching it live.
Cheers,
Thank
everyone.
you very much. We also enjoyed
everyone.
it.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.